Hey everyone, Fear Crawler here. Welcome to the video. The following 3 stories were written by my good friend Brother Deep. I'll link his YouTube channel in the video description below, as well as give links to the stories. He is an extremely talented individual, and I do hope you'll take some time to check his stuff out. I've also asked my good friend Mr. Terror to assist me with this video. I'll link his YouTube channel in the video description below. And please guys, don't confuse this Mr. Terror with the other Mr. Terror. This is the original Mr. Terror, the one that's been on YouTube for a few years now, and actually has decent content. So please, sit back, relax, and enjoy.
I used to work as a janitor for a little under 5 years. When I got the job, I started working with a guy named Lars who had been the school's custodian for about 20 years. The building was quite large, with 2 above-ground floors and a basement which was equipped with a giant boiler. Lars was a pretty nice guy. He was always pleasant, had a great work ethic, plenty of energy, and knew everyone, both staff and student, by name. He was the one to show me the ropes when I started the job. By and large, Lars was an all-around great guy, though he had this weird fascination with the boiler room. It was his favorite area of the building. On the other hand, I contrasted Lars. I hated that job and had a pretty ill-tempered attitude about the work. For me, it was something till I could find a profession to better suit myself. After I finished my job training and got comfortable with my duties, I took the morning shift, which overlapped the beginning of Lars by an hour and a half. This ended up making my shift a bit better. Though he was a nice guy, Lars tended to get on my nerves. He was way too chipper for me and would often say things like, "Cheer up," or "things could be worse," which always irritated me. Seriously, have you ever felt better after someone told you to look on the bright side? Yeah, I didn't think so. Anyway, after having spent about a year there, Lars asked me to stop by some evening so he could show me something intriguing about the boiler. I was never interested, so I always come up with an excuse why I couldn't come, all the while reassuring him I would come by one of these evenings. It was weird and sounded boring, so I never went. It was about 3 years after I got the job when the kids started saying they could hear screaming from the walls and vents. At the time, I didn't have any explanation, but Lars reassured everyone that old pipes sometimes sound like a person screaming. However, when the sound persisted, an investigation was performed, and then the police got involved. Subsequently, Lars was arrested for kidnapping and eventually convicted for 8 counts of murder. Apparently, one of the victims was found alive in a small hidden room within the basement and was screaming for help. With Lars gone, the place didn't feel the same, so I worked there for nearly another 2 years until they were able to replace me. I work delivering pizzas now, and I have been for the past 10 years. Over the years, I've kept up with Lars' trial and eventual execution, during which the poor bastard insisted he was innocent. I kinda feel bad for him. After all, I wasn't caught.
I feel I am finally ready to tell you the events concerning my friend John as best as I can remember. John and I were always fairly close. We met one another at a pretty young age and remained good friends for as long as we knew each other. For most of our lives, we did just about everything together. John was 2 years older than me and quite a bit more adventurous than I was, so there were times when John would go off on his own adventures, leaving me behind. This was how we met Trevor. We three became fast friends. However, Trevor had more of a penchant for thrills than John, but John refused to be left behind. This inevitably led to John getting in over his head and either getting in trouble with his parents or hurt. He never got injured, but John did go to the hospital for stitches a few times. I tried to be the voice of reason, but when one of your friends is egging on the other, it's hard to talk some sense into them. One thing the two of them shared was a particular enthusiasm for thrills, which is something I don't really have much interest in. Many times they would go into their own world and leave me in the dust. During the first week of August 3 years ago is when I believe the incidents began to occur. Often John and Trevor would watch horror films, tell scary stories, and troll obscure websites looking for something to give them the creeps. I can remember Trevor was a member of a couple horror and dark fiction themed forums he had received emails from about emerging and trending topics. One particular email was sent by some user in Trevor's buddy list with a picture which was said to be extremely terrifying and to view at your own risk, containing a JPEG file. As far as I can tell, this picture was the catalyst. At first, John wasn't interested in the picture when Trevor told him about it, saying the message must have been a joke and that it wasn't scary in the least. For a while, nothing happened, but gradually things became strange. Sometime later that month, Trevor began acting eccentric. It was about 2 weeks after seeing the picture that he expressed to the two of us there were qualities about it he couldn't stop thinking about. These qualities within the picture began to creep him out after looking more closely at it. I didn't care to hear about the details, so the two of them discussed the picture on their own. This was the last time Trevor spoke to anyone but John about what he saw, as far as I could tell, and began to distance himself from others throughout the remainder of August and into September. After a few weeks, the only person he seemed to talk to was John, so any information I received was secondhand through him. I believe it was by mid-September Trevor's relationship with all of his friends, excluding John, had quickly deteriorated. Not only did he refuse to talk to us, but he also spoke ill of us to his parents till the only person who could visit him at the house was John. Still, throughout this whole thing, John would talk about what Trevor was going through and ask me my advice. I can remember John telling me Trevor was having a hard time getting to sleep because he was having nightmares about the picture. Throughout the entire month of September, I could tell Trevor was becoming progressively more emotionally distraught. He seemed to be dealing with a lot of depression. On October 1st, Trevor went missing. A few of us went out searching for him, but we didn't receive any help from the police, who told his parents that he would need to be missing for at least 24 hours before they could do anything. It didn't matter anyway. We ended up finding him dead in the forest near his house. Trevor had committed suicide by hanging. For a while, we went into mourning for Trevor, and just as things began to go back to normal, John discovered an email in his inbox sent to him the night before Trevor's death, with the subject, "Should the worst happen." Having seen this, John immediately told me about it. It simply stated that he couldn't handle what was happening to him, and that the attached photo was to blame. After hearing this, I advised John to just delete the damn thing and get on with his life, to which he agreed. However, the following day John told me after he had deleted the file then went to bed, he later woke up in the middle of the night and saw the picture displayed on his monitor. He said he didn't know why he woke up or how his monitor turned on, but that was what he swore happened. I wanted to believe what he said. I really wanted him to be telling the truth, but to be honest, I think the curiosity got the better of him and he looked at the picture. His reaction to looking at the picture for the first time was the same as Trevor's. He told me it was a well-done pencil drawing of a man from his neck up, with scraggly hair and disfigured face which was rotting around his mouth, so much so his teeth were exposed. His figure takes up the majority of the picture, with a field behind it, which makes up the horizon. It had the same artistic styling as Stephen Gammell, the man who drew the art of the Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark book series. Within the next few nights after giving this picture a look, it started popping up in his dreams, causing him to have terrible nightmares. John started to lose sleep. At first it was difficult and he would only get 3 to 5 hours a night. This was short-lived and he went from having his sleep hindered to it becoming impossible for him to rest within a week. As things progressed, John became depressed, suicidal, and started self-harming. And inside of a couple of days, the mood shift he was experiencing was outwardly apparent. Around this time, John's memory progressively became worse, until it was non-existent after having stayed awake for 6 days. Through this progression, he maintained regular contact with me, which wasn't the case for any of John's other friends. With his memory in shambles, he started to act paranoid, and refused to trust anyone but myself. He would avoid people as much as he could and went as far as to tell his parents lies about other friends so that I was the only person they would allow to visit him, nearly completely isolating himself from everyone but me. With everyone out of the picture, John started to tell me about a black figure which had appeared to him, at first in his dreams. Then it manifested into the picture, and finally he began to see the thing randomly throughout the day. All he could see of it was the top half of its head. It was completely black, had tall pointy ears, and stared at him with white eyes. No other features could be seen, and it always showed up peering around the side of something, or someone. Oftentimes our conversations became convoluted, and John would go off on incoherent tangents, talking about these things which live beyond us, who have existed from a time before sound. At one point, just under 3 weeks after he looked at the picture, John was not shy about his self-mutilation, and would either do it right in front of us, or the damage would be done on areas of his body which were visible. I was deeply concerned for the guy, and we all tried to help, but this concern was completely dwarfed by the worry I felt during the last 2 days of John's life. I can remember it was October 24th. John showed up to school with a completely unwavering manic grin on his face, which never changed. For these 2 days, he was in an extremely good mood. He spoke calm and quiet with happiness in his voice. The first day he was sent to the counselor, but after being unable to find anything wrong with him, they allowed John to attend class under the condition he could pass a UA. Until the test result returned, they couldn't keep him from attending class. It didn't matter anyhow. In the end, he was clean. On October 25th, I remember having a short conversation with John after school, which was fairly concerning. He couldn't seem to remember much of anything. He handed me a piece of folded up paper, and as we parted ways, he reached down, grabbed his pinky finger, then, without a flinch, wince, or single change in that grotesque smile of his, John broke the digits sideways, turned, and walked away. That night, John bled to death. His body had many severe self-inflicted wounds when it was discovered. The officer who was on the scene said he would have believed John was brutally tortured, then murdered, if the evidence hadn't proven to the contrary. Sometime later, after having coped with the deaths of my 2 best friends, I finally was able to bring myself to read the letter John wrote to me. The note said, "The black thing came to us from beyond space and descended upon our world. It was killed long before man by the gods of Earth who refused to trust it.
Dear QUALLOW.
The label given to the nameless thing whose body was destroyed, but lives on mimetically through diagrams of its ideals. As it appears to me, my memories become its, and its become mine. while I spiral through an endless descent of the victims who have come before me.
Dear QUALLOW,
It is the unknown fear within the things we can see, which we cannot explain from unknown propriety. It has consumed me, brother. Do not allow it to take you. Normally, I don't feel comfortable about speaking of this time in my life. However, lately I feel I need to, and perhaps get your advice about a matter. About a week ago, I received an email from someone I don't know. There was no subject or anything to the message, so I got curious and opened it. In the email, there's a JPEG file attached to it, with the message typed above it. Extremely terrifying. View at your own risk. I haven't been myself since seeing the image, and for some reason I don't feel safe talking to anyone but you about this. So please, give me your honest answer. Do you see the black thing standing behind the tree? I own a small tabby cat. Every night for a while now, between 9 and 10 o'clock, I would let my cat out through the front door to roam around outside for a while. Then at about midnight, before I go to bed, I'll let the cat back in. Recently, I've been waking up to the sound of scratching on the outside of my house, and this would cause me to panic, believing I forgot to let the cat back in. At first, this scratching would wake me up at about 3 a.m., and every time I was unable to find its source. Each night I've been awakened by this sound, it would happen earlier than the last. This has persisted for the past month, until it finally showed itself to me. Before going to bed, I opened the front door calling for my cat. However, it didn't come, so I decided to check the back deck, and sure enough, he was sitting outside the slider door, meowing to let him in. Once I opened the slider, he came running. Just before closing the blinds, I saw a tall, thin man with yellowing skin, large black eyes, a giant smile which had long teeth, and long fingernails at the end of grotesquely long fingers, standing in my backyard staring at me. The only thing I could do was jump back in fear, and when I did, I tripped over a chair. Quietly as I could, I leapt to my feet, and within that moment he was gone. This happened the night before last. With my cell phone in hand yesterday night, I was prepared to call the police should that man show up again. However, when I brought my cat in, there was no sign of him. I had to make sure the premises were secure, so I walked around the outside of my house with a baseball bat in hand. Finding nothing, I went back inside. At about 3 a.m., I woke to the sound of scratching. Panicking because I thought I forgot to let the cat in, but as I sat in the darkness looking at my cat asleep on my bed, I realized the scratching was coming from my bedroom door. It lasted for about 10 minutes while I sat in the dark, frozen with fear. When it was over, I opened the door and found nothing but scratch marks in the paint. I don't think I'll be able to sleep tonight.